Hello, everyone, again. Uh, I want to share my experience of working ViewBinding during the some last two years. Uh, First of all, I want to tell some word about itself. I'm an Android developer. I have more than 5 years of commercial experience. During the time, I work in different companies. I work on different projects, from some small startups when I need to implement all from scratch, or to huge companies. They where work more than 100 developers and supported all the project. During time, I work with different libraries, approaches, and architecture. Also, you can see the QR code. If you want to communicate with me, it's some simple way. You possibly use the LinkedIn for this. Okay, it's some shortly about me, and start time for talking. First of all, some small introduction to evolution of interaction with Vue before ViewBinding in Android world. First of all, we need to tell some word about XML. What is it? XML is extensible markup language. It is a special type of files which used in different areas in Android from start. This format used to describe of user interface in general. For describe of user interface, use the pattern composition, an idea to present our views in hierarchy from root to child. Screen is present itself how combination of different views. On this slide, you can see some simple example when we have constraint layout in root and we have only a simple text view with some simple text. If you need to interact with view, every time we need to work with ID of each concrete view. How it works from all the time. I will show on the next slide. If we want to work with specific view in our code, we need to use to find this view by a specific method in our activity. This method called findViewById. In all time, we use the typed variant of this method. You can see in angle bracket, we need to specify of type of view what we're looking for. I think if you work with Android more than 5 years, I think you work with this approach. After, it's simplified, and we don't need to use a strong typization for this method. And we can avoid declaration of type of view what we're looking for. It's some simple simplified. If you remember, it's happened after in Android we start use Java 6. Okay, next step. Next step is simplify of work with Vue. For this, we use the Butterfly library from Jack Wharton. This library is use code generation to skip the step findViewById. But in same times, we need to add some boilerplate code. We need to market all our views by specific annotation, this point of ID of our view. And also we have some another annotation to some simple action with our view, like to click, long press, and some in editor. I think if you work with Vue with Butterfly, you remember about this. Next, when Kotlin stay on the official language of Android development, we continue to use this approach, but we rewrite only on this code on Kotlin. But also Butterfly possibly use in this case. After, when Kotlin suggests their own solution for simplify work with findViewById. By JetBrains, provided by JetBrains in the Kotlin Android extension Gradle plugin. And what does this plugin do? It add findViewById in final compilation of code and get for us direct access to the view. For example, in this slide, you see a simple view, text view, and how we possibly get access to this view in our activity class. First problem with this approach is that if you want to work with the camel case variable inside of class, you should use the camel case in XML file. It is not naming convention for XML file because in XML in general we use a snake case. It's some first problems and what possible see when you see classes and XML file would use Kotlin synthetic. Second, if you use the Kotlin synthetic in a multi-model application, you get the problem with access of view from other models, and some conflicts problems happen in this time if your views has same name, and also Kotlin synthetic is not null safety. Okay, and last not least, ViewBinding is coming in this time. You can see how look like this code if you implement with using of ViewBinding. How you can see, we needed to do some setup before using. It is not so simple how Kotlin synthetic, but why this way is more preferable in this moment. Next table helps to answer this question. How you can see on this table, ViewBinding has more advantages if you compare with other approaches. It is the best solution if you start project from scratch. But what about existing project? You need to migrate on ViewBinding because Kotlin Synthetic and Butterfly Knife are deprecated now and don't support it in Kotlin version of 1.8 and higher. And this is common task what I did in many times in the last 2 years. And now I want to share with you 6 things what I learned during this time. Okay, let's go. First of all, we should tell about basic of view representation in Android. XML is the base for this. When we describe the user interface, we should display on the screen. First thing that I learned was how happens to convert our XML file to hierarchy of views. This simple picture describes the basics of process of transformation data from XML file into our representation in the view. Because data stored in the files with different extension, we should have a process of parsing this file. Because parsing very often involves reflection, which is not a simple process and requires resources and time, we need some optimization to simplify it and at our time. For this reason, XML files are transformed during the assembly when we prepare an APK and bundle. During the time, code what present in XML file is simplified and cleaned up, and it's helped to reducing for future parsing. Okay, after what is next? After when at the moment when we launch our application, layout inflator is coming in the set. That class provides several methods that helps transform our XML files into view for rendering on the screen. As written in the documentation, a layout inflator instantiates a layout XML file into the corresponding view object. It is an abstract class that provides several inflate methods that does the main work of transformation. We don't create layout inflator directly. We use instances that are provided by the system. We always use it for if you need to work with XML. In some and other cases, we use the layout inflator too. And this slide is present some common cases where we use the layout inflator. For example, in activity, we use a layout inflator inside of the method set content view. every time when we start new activity. Also, when we're working with recycle view to instantiate view holder, we use the layout inflator for this. And of course, when we create a view for our fragment, every time layout inflator does this work. Okay, in these two articles, you can find you can read about how correctly use the layout inflator, because this inflator has different parameters and not so. Sometimes we possibly use layout inflate incorrectly, and you possibly read this article if you want to read now more. And also in second articles, you can find some interesting points how customize layout inflator if you need. How you can see, converting from XML to hierarchy of view is not so simple process and involves some resources and time, because involve reflection in some another and parsing process. Okay, another word is some first thought what I learned at XML, parsing XML, transformation from XML to our view. It's some not simple process, involve many stages. And we are moving on. Next idea what I learned. ViewBinding was introduced in Android Studio 3.6 at 2020. Since this time, we can enable in our project. Second idea that I learned how code generation work and what we get as output. How it's helped to us easy and safe to work with our layouts and views on it. All magic of binding of our XML happens when we enable ViewBinding in our build Gradle file. Also, some artifact generated during the building project, build project, and you can find in output folder this. For each XML file, what represent layout was generated classes has name as XML file name in camel case with adding the in end part of bind. In this slide, you can see the example. Okay, go inside of this class and check what this class contains. We check what happens on the example of our simple layout what described above. We have only two views. First of all, it was generated simple final class that we cannot extend it. This class implements simple interface ViewBinding, which contains only one method getRoot that should return the root view described in our XML file. The generated class has public variables that reflected all XML views that have ID. If view in XML don't have ID, we cannot get directly access to it by ViewBinding, except exception only for root element. These elements store in separate variables that has name root view. In our example, root element is constraint layout. It's stored in these variables, and we get access to it through the method of interface getRoot. Also, generated class has several additional methods. Several inflates method that handle logic of to inflate our XML by layout inflator. Also, generate method bind. This method handle logic to bind XML view with variable in generated class. For binding, use static utility method from ViewBinding library. What interesting, if you talk about ViewBinding library, ViewBinding contains only two elements: interface ViewBinding and utility class. It is quite simple. What does happen if you use the utility method? What does happen if, inside of this utility method? We only iterate through the nested child views and try to find our view by general method find view by ID. It's all. It's look very simple. Okay, we summarize. Logic what we use in generated class to bind our views it is very simple, but main work hide it from us inside of work of plugin. That plugin generates these classes. Plugin provide a nice user experience when we work in Android Studio. For example, it helps to navigate us to the corresponding layout when we press on binding class. They get to access all binding classes without required building phases and some other features. Okay, we know the benefits what brings ViewBinding. We know how it's work, but what problems can lead this approach? About this is the next my thought. Memory leak. Memory leak is a problem that we can create during the development process. By simple words, it case when in memory we keep an object what we never use. This object occupies the memory and can lead to problem in the future. What kind of problem? For example, out of memory is one from this. If you when we work with ViewBinding, we can do that. And thought that I learned, we should always keep in mind memory leaks when we work with ViewBinding. Okay, this implementation of ViewBinding in activity class. Basically, it's look normal. We don't have problem places here. But what does happen if you try to implement this approach on the fragment? At first sight, this fragment it's look normal too. But what does happen if you use this fragment in ViewPager? To check this, I create a simple application and add leak canary for tracking of memory leak. Okay, and this slide and video, you can see how this simple application work. Application has only ViewPager that uses some fragments for each page, and one from this fragment has incorrect implementation. How you can see, we got the 4 memory leaks warnings during the working when we swiping in this ViewPager. Because we use this fragment with incorrect implementation of ViewBinding. Stack trace of problems clearly describe the reason why this memory leak happened. Why did it happen? Because fragment has complex life cycle and possible to be case when fragments stay in the memory, but view components of it shouldn't be destroyed. We kept a link of view components in our ViewBinding variable. It lead to memory leak. How we can fix it? Key idea, we need to drop reference on our view components when it will be never used. For this reason, our fragment has special callback that fire it when view representation of fragment not needed. This callback call on has name onDestroyView. Now we will see how Google suggests to solve this problem. First of all, we need to introduce a nullable variable to store reference on instance of our binding class. To avoid check on null every time when we need to some kind of view, we introduce additional variable to get access to our binding class. And finally, we need to set now to the variable that store our binding class when call on destroy view. Okay, and summarize. ViewBinding powerful tools, but we needed to remember about memory leaks and shouldn't forget to set up a null to reference that hold our binding class. It's this moment is very important for fragments, but yeah, in general for fragments, some key problems. Here you can find some simple project what I showed before. They contain the wrong implementation of ViewBinding and correct implementation too. You can find load this project and see how it's work. Okay. Okay. First thought, because sometimes developers are lazy, like me, they try to optimize places when it needed to write the repeated code. ViewBinding is not an exception from this. It is how look full code of implementation ViewBinding for fragment, what we described before. You see, we have some many lines of code. This is how it's look like this code after optimization. If you start using some third-party libraries, it's look nice. Yeah, it's look nice. We use property delegate to hide all boilerplate code, and except 5 line of code, we have only one. It is a good solution, but in general, I don't like to use some library would help to work with other library. I not prefer this way. But I not will describe how it's working generally, but all solution I use the same principle and idea. And this list, you can see only some popular solution. Of course, you can write your own solution and add some other implementation if you want, because it's these libraries are based on some very simple idea. My suggestion is to use for first library from this list, because it's look like to more supported on current moment, and they has the different variant of configuration. Yeah, it's my suggestion for if you want to optimize work with ViewBinding. Okay, summarize. If you use some technology, you should be ready for optimization it, and for customization it depends on your project for simplify your life. ViewBinding only example of approach what we possible optimize for using in our project. Okay, we go. First thought what I learned. All technologies, what we use in everyday work, are not the static technology. They change every time. We cannot tell about we can tell about evolution of it. And in case of working with Vue in Android world is not exception. On this timeline, you can see how change the approach of working with Vue during the time. Some projects still use the old solutions, but they should be migrate a new approach. But after some years, and this new solution possible be deprecated and supported too. In other words, you should be flexible and ready to learn something new, and don't keep only on the current technology. What about ViewBinding? It looks like the best solution for working with Vue on the current moment, but what is the next? Compose is common, and declaration the approach is common too. Maybe in close future, imperative way to describe of our user interface and ViewBinding will be stay inactive and deprecated. And we will tell about it in the past tense. Who does now? Okay, and the last thing, the last 6 thought that I want to share with you. ViewBinding and Compose possible and this exist in same project. It is a natural way when we migrate existing project to Compose step by step. When we start to write new screens only to Compose or add some composable function on existing screen, we should mix these two approaches in same time. But it's not the problem for ViewBinding, and we can do it easily. For example, if you want to use the composable function inside of old screen, you should only add some special compose view to regular XML file. And after, you should be fine required composite view with ViewBinding, and you can place your composable function inside of set content method itself. It's some very simple if you need to bind XML and some composable function. If you need to do opposite thing, you possibly do it with some special composable function, what has name Android View. You just need to place inside View what you want to use. In this slide, you see some simple example how we possible inside of our composable function use the text view. It looks very simple too. If you're interested in this article, you can find the more details about interoperability with Compose. New Compose error is coming, and ViewBinding ready for this, and you possible mix both solution in same screen without problem. Okay, now we have time to summarize. ViewBinding is a simple approach to organize work with View and XML. But if you spend more time to deep dive on it, you get the more solid understanding how ViewBinding and Android work. Solid knowledge help you avoid the hidden problems and help to use the more optimal solution. I learned this work with ViewBinding. I'm enjoying to share this knowledge with you. I think it was helpful for you, and happy coding. Okay, now we have a section of question and answer. I will be glad to answer on your questions.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts around this. It's really interesting to see how how findViewById has evolved over these years. But I have one personal question. In the meanwhile, we'll wait for our audience to ask a question. Like this topic has really touched me as well over the long years. But what do you see as a future? Like, yeah, Compose is there and ViewBinding was there. People really started loving ViewBinding and data binding altogether. But with Compose, how do you see it getting more evolved?
Yeah, I think it's some key trend on this development in Android development on last 2 years, and many people start use Compose in projects. And I know there's some new developers who now only Compose like to way to describe and display view. I think this trend continue, and after maybe some years, XML is not staying not actual and stays a deprecated technology. But if you talk about Android, it's maybe a shift on some many years, not on like 1 or 2 years. It's mainly a shift on 10s or more.
Yeah, probably. Anyways, let's wait for the future and see how it evolves. Anyways, we have our first question here. Let me put it on the screen. It's by Greeky Jimmy. Doesn't view binding in general kind of breaking the single responsibility principle? You're thinking about it, whether it's actually true or not? What do you?
But in general, I think mm, I not uh, if you talk about some generated classes, ViewBinding, it's some very simple classes. They do only some one scene. They inflate our layout and get access to our view. And the classes not do something additional. I'm not sure they break single responsibility principle.
Yeah, even I think so, because I think so. Like in general, view binding is just acting as an intermediary layer between the view and the activities and everything. So even my take is what you just said. Like I don't think so. They are breaking single responsibility principle. But Jimmy, if you think that you have some other thoughts, feel free to add another question in the chat, and we'll be happy to take it forward from there. Okay. In the meanwhile, we're waiting for the next one. So, personally, what do you prefer to use if you're using an XML kind of system, view binding or data binding?
Yeah, excellent, good question. In general, I think is data binding is a more good candidate for breaking single responsibility principle because they do many things, and very often if you use the data binding, it's you possible create the problems in future because they try to shift some business logic inside of XML file. I not prefer this, and I know there's some very little number of projects that use data binding. Yeah, I think it's not so very good solution. Yeah.
I beg to differ. I'm the on the other side. It is this was a trick question. I love data binding, but I don't like view binding. But anyways, everyone have their own opinion and takes. We have another one by one of our hosts, Mohammed. He say it's a fun question. He says, "I always wondered why the binding classes convert IDs to camel case. Any idea why?"
Yeah, it's because in camel case Slime is may camel case is key naming convention in Java in Kotlin, and to simplify these cases when we write in XML file in snack cases, and after if you want to work with this view in our Java Kotlin class, we need to use the camel cases. It's some good good decision to convert to camel cases because I didn't like to use snake case variables inside of Java classes if you use a Kotlin synthetic. It's like to uh,
It was very painful actually.
yeah, or opposite scene when we inside of XML you use ID with camel cases.
Yeah. I always hated that part, whenever we have to use, you know, something underscore something in the XML, and then when it comes on the Android side, like you're not used to it at all. So I always hated it. So that's why I think so they did a very good thing that, they decided, okay, let's finally adopt a camel casing, and hopefully in the future, if they continue doing the XML part, like they don't move 100% to declarative part, they would even consider adding camel casing in the name of the IDs. But let's see. Okay. Anything else you would like to share? Your any fun experience with data binding or view binding? No, nothing. Okay, we'll wait for few more seconds for any last question. If not, then probably we'll say thank you to you.
Yeah, I want to tell thanks for all um, who comment and this on my presentation and listen. I will be glad to any feedback about this presentation, and I suggest you to join me in LinkedIn and connect to me. Yeah, thanks
Okay.
a lot for everyone for this time.
Yep. Before ending, can you just bring your QR code once again? So if people haven't scanned it, they can scan it right now.
Yeah, just a moment. Just a moment. Yeah, you possible scan this and find me in LinkedIn and send your feedback if you like to this.
Okay. Thank you for sharing this insight with us. We really loved you on being stage. So hopefully see you next time as well.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.